From the unexplained to the mundane, come join us on a journey to the fringe. Hello and welcome to Journey to the Fringe, which I have been going through our comments that people have left on our episodes, Chelsea, and I need to restate this just in case it's not clear. We do this as a hobby for ourselves, and we find ourselves very funny. We laugh at ourselves. We are not stopping this. This is our hobby. We are not doing it for the money. It will continue this way. Just kind of deal with it, okay? We are your hilarious podcast hosts, Taylor and Chelsea, here today following up on our first part of the Edgar Mitchell saga, which saw him as the hero of the space people. Now, Chelsea, this is a weird way to do a two-parter in that it is not recorded directly beside each other, nor is it the last episode we recorded. There may be a bit of time where we're kind of forgetting what happened in the first episode. But do you remember kind of where we left off with this?
Oh yeah, he was super boring.
He went to space. He did that weird psychic experiment that he wanted to do, and then left.
Right,
and
yeah.
then
I had no controls.
Yeah, and then he opened up the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and then that's where we left off.
Up to date.
Weirdly enough, no talks of UFOs or aliens in that episode.
Right.
We are going to get there in this episode and how he ends up as a fairly prominent name within the UFO community. Despite what's going to happen here, I do need to put a caveat in front here. We are not very specifically looking at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, nor Edgar Mitchell's involvement with that, or how it might coalesce with his view on aliens. What we are looking at is specifically things that he has said about aliens outside of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And yes, I am very aware he had many views that likely intertwined his views of aliens with his views on telepathy and the universe at large. We're going to have to forgo those. Those might be a different episode in the future, but you're going to see how long this episode is. I couldn't take noetic science in here as well. So that's just kind of how it goes.
Fair enough.
Right off the bat, having said that, I'm going to now just kind of say a few things that connect noetic science to everything that we're going to be talking about.
Okay.
So this comes from the Wikipedia article on Edgar Mitchell. Journalist Annie Jacobson has asserted that Mitchell's Mind Science Institute, a Los Angeles, California-based organization ultimately subsumed by the Institute of Noetic Sciences, was employed by the Central Intelligence Agency as a surreptitious conduit for payments to Andrea Puharich and Yuri Geller, while the latter was evaluated by the SRI International Research Group in 1972. In 1976, Mitchell attempted to secure additional funding for the SRI Group's remote viewing research in a private meeting with then Director of Central Intelligence, George H.W. Bush, who knew Mitchell socially. Although Bush demurred, he suggested the pursuit of military sponsorship leading to the formation of the Stargate project in 1978. I just need to establish that he does somewhat have insider connections to people who are higher up within the government. Like, he has met and had meetings with George W. Bush Sr.
Yeah, okay.
So from there, Chelsea, he went to space in the 70s. First interview I could find where he actually talks about aliens or UFOs happens in 1996.
Wow.
So it's a long time from when he was actually involved in the UFOs.
I wouldn't even remember being in space anymore.
No, that's an entire somebody who graduated with the degree's lifetime. The first time I could find him actually talking about anything in space outside of NASA with aliens or UFOs is Dateline NBC, April 19th, 1996.
Interesting choice.
Yes, and I took a very specific part of this interview. And a lot of this is going to be interviews that he did here onwards, okay?
Okay.
So he's interviewed by a guy named Murphy. It's a transcript, so it's kind of done in a very awkward way, but we're going to go with it. Edgar Mitchell, I'm convinced there's life throughout the universe. It's just a question of how developed. Are they a few thousand years ahead of us? It doesn't take much. Murphy as a voiceover. Edgar Mitchell has always marched to his own definitively different drum. He's the son of a New Mexico cattle rancher, but he gave up punching cows for punching supersonic holes in the sky as a Navy test pilot.
Why was
he went on to become an MIT physics scholar and ultimately one of NASA's best and brightest. I've never gotten that. Like,
ranchers don't punch cows.
We grew up on a cattle farm. I think I've punched a cow once and it kicked me like immediately after.
Yeah, I don't remember any cow punching.
Chelsea, have you punched a cow?
Nope.
Okay.
Oh,
No,
I
I
don't
don't
think I've ever
recommend it.
once-
They know what's going on.
They know they're being punched and they'll try and punch
Yeah.
you back, but their punches are
With their
kicks.
back legs. Not as bad as a
Yeah.
horse's kick, but still not great. Murphy again. The moon trip drove him to try to reconcile his two conflicting natures, the test pilot scientist and the spiritual pilgrim. He was off on his own voyage now to inner space, and there he met a shaman, a Tibetan healer, about the time his mother was ill. Edgar Mitchell.
Oh.
Well, she was suffering and was legally blind, so I had got the healer and my mother together just to see what would happen. Murphy, wait a second. Here you are, a guy from MIT. There's a lot of Edwards Air Force Base in you, a lot of Chen's lunar injection. And here you are talking to a guy from Tibet saying he's going to heal her. Edgar Mitchell. Well, I have to admit that it was incongruous, but my perverse curiosity said, let's find out if this guy's real. Murphy, voiceover. And what Mitchell found out amazed him. Edgar Mitchell. Well, I got them together, and he did this thing, which is primarily passing his hands over her head. And at 6 o'clock the next morning, Mother came rushing into my room, her Bible in one hand, her glasses in the other, and said, son, I can see. Murphy, what did you make of that? Mitchell, I was dumbfounded. So I took the next logical step. I invited the man to come live with me for a while so I could figure out what was going on.
Oh, that's totally the logical next step.
Murphy, the astronaut who'd been to the moon is bunking with a Tibetan healer? Edgar Mitchell, yep, and he's quite a guy. Murphy, voiceover. Almost 2 years after his moonwalk, Mitchell left the astronaut corps and started delving into the paranormal, and on that path less traveled, he shocked his old NASA buddies once again when he aligned himself with the controversial psychic Uri Geller, most famous for bending spoons, supposedly with his mind. Murphy, voiceover. Mitchell personally championed Geller's research in the United States. Murphy, but there are people, doctor, who say, fraud, charlatan, this guy. Edgar Mitchell, sorry? Murphy, I've been sold a bill of goods. Edgar Mitchell. They're the ones that have to look a little deeper. Murphy, voiceover. And now Mitchell is taking another step beyond, past healer and ESP. Get ready. This man who's been to the moon is saying publicly for the first time that he believes we have been visited by inhabitants of other planets, extraterrestrials. Here, he says he talked to people who've had close encounters of the third kind. And this is kind of the important part here. Edgar Mitchell. I have no firsthand, can't laugh here, serious part. I have no firsthand experience, but I've had the opportunity to meet with people from 3 countries who in the course of their official duties claim to have had personal firsthand encounter experience. Murphy, with extraterrestrials. Edgar Mitchell, with extraterrestrials. Murphy, aliens from other place? Edgar Mitchell, that's what they claim. Murphy, voiceover. Take, for instance, maybe the most famous sighting of ufology, the wreckage of something that fell out of the sky and was found in the deserts of Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. Mitchell is in the camp of those who believe it was a spacecraft. He scoffs at the government's explanation of a crashed high-atmosphere balloon. Edgar Mitchell. The people that were there say that's utter nonsense. Come on, let's have the truth. Murphy. You think it's more likely than not that extraterrestrials have been to this planet? Edgar Mitchell. From what I now understand and have experienced and seen the evidence for, I think the evidence is very strong. The large portions of it are classified. Murphy. Classified by whom? Edgar Mitchell. By governments. Murphy. You're saying it not only likely happened, but there's been a cover-up? Edgar Mitchell. Oh, I think if it has happened the way it seems to be, there's definitely been a cover-up. Murphy, voiceover. Mitchell wouldn't name names, but he says some of his information comes from former highly classified U.S. government employees, people who say our government picked up sonic engineering secrets from UFOs. The Department of Defense declined to comment on Mitchell's allegations, but gave us the U.S. Air Force's standard handout on unidentified flying objects, stating, quote, there has been no evidence indicating that sightings categorized as unidentified or extraterrestrial, end quotes. Case closed. Murphy and Mitchell walking. Pentagon. Air Force handout on unidentified flying objects. Murphy, voiceover. So is Edgar Mitchell lost in space? Not to audiences like this one at Cambridge University in England. Unidentified man. This is a man who's traveled further than almost any of us. Murphy. Scientists and New Agers find something provocative in this quiet man from the moon. Murphy. You have been the subject of, let's face it, over the years of a kind of wink wink nudge nudge. Oh, there's Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell. Murphy. ESP, all of that stuff. Edgar Mitchell. Yep. Murphy. That's Edgar's thing. Edgar Mitchell. Yep. Murphy. Does it bother you when colleagues and friends regard the way you have thought in the last 20 years in that way? Edgar Mitchell. It is always difficult when you're a pioneer. That's what I thought was relevant from that interview. I feel like that interviewer really skewed it towards this guy's pushing boundaries outside of the space thing.
I mean, he's breaking a story.
Yeah, no, of course. And that's the way he wrote that's going to get clicks. And I shouldn't say clicks because this is 96. So I don't even know if you call it views at that time. Viewership?
No, it wouldn't have been views at that point.
Eyeballs? I don't know. But this is really weird timing, or I should say opportune timing, as you're going to see as we keep moving forward, as to what my theory is as to why he starts talking about aliens right around 96.
Okay, because I was wondering, like, why after all that time? And
Yeah, it's over 20 years after he was on the moon that he's talking about this. Like, he's been doing noetic sciences. He did have some run-ins with the government, but it's not until 96 that he starts talking about aliens and UFOs. And again, during that time, he did not name names. He just said he's known some people. So the next time he talks about UFOs is in 97. This is at the Prophets Conference. I don't know what that is. I don't know where it is, but this is him presenting. I think this part, you're going to click in to what I figured out pretty damn quick. The Associated Press brought national and international recognition to the comments expressed by Dr. Edgar Mitchell at the Prophets Conference presented by Axiom last October. The following excerpt by Dr. Mitchell is of significant interest to those concerned with the truth. Following the Prophets Conference, remarks presented by Dr. Stephen Greer regarding technology and efforts to brief government officials on the UFO phenomena, Dr. Edgar Mitchell responded by saying, quote, "I'd like to add a bit to what Dr. Stephen Greer, had to say. It was a marvelous report. But what I'd like to add to it is that in our briefing of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Intelligence Group, it became very clear to us that they were naive. They did not really know any more about this effort than we do, if as much. That is because, as Bob Dean pointed out earlier, most of the people in government were not in government when I retired 25 years ago. They are younger people. The files going back 50 years just no longer exist. They've either been purged, compromised, or whatever. They don't exist. So when we blame government for not being forthright, they really don't have anything to be forthright about, at least at that level. Now, somewhere there's knowledgeable people. And Stephen has ferreted out quite a few of them. And in my own efforts in talking with these folks and talking with government, the question often comes up as to how they could have kept this secret for so long. And friends, they haven't. It's been around us all the time, but it has been denied and obscured. I often like to state the condition, the story, the myth, if you will, about Columbus coming here and some of these Indians not seeing the ship simply because it was not their collective consciousness and their repertoire. They at least didn't want to see them. Much of what we're seeing now is what many people don't want to see either. There's been a massive effort at creating that, or denying the obvious, of saying that you're not seeing what's sitting right in front of you right now, thus causing doubt in your mind. It's amazingly effective, so documentation and evidence that is probably the smoking gun type of evidence has been totally compromised by saying that it's simply not true. So it is not true that they, the government, have kept the secret. They haven't kept the secret, but it has been totally compromised by misinformation and disinformation. Now for my own experience. I have had no first-hand experiences like so many of you. I have not encountered a UFO, and we did not have them trailing us, as far as we know, going to the moon. We didn't meet anyone on the moon. We did it just like we said we did. For the last 25 years, we have dealt with the issue of, on one hand, the flat earthers who said you didn't go anywhere. It was all filmed out here in the desert. And on the other hand, another that said, yes, you have been there, but you were followed. You were in contact with UFOs. There were beings on the moon that you met and had contact with. Well, that's not true either. So we have walked between these two extremes of misinformation, disinformation, and pure ignorance. We did what we said we did. And I want to assure you, from what that period up until the current time, NASA was one of the organizations ignorant of this type of activity. And the prevailing wisdom in NASA at the time was that we didn't even think about it. It was a ridiculous idea that we would encounter beings on the moon. However, in the last 25 years since that time, I became quite knowledgeable and became friends with Alan Hynek. I know and worked with Jacques Vallée consistently now, and I have known the gentlemen on this stage, Bob Dean and Stephen Greer, for a few years now. For me, with all the evidence, it's not a matter of believing, it's a matter of preponderance of evidence, and the evidence keeps building. The sightings keep happening, so it's clear that they are ET, and I will question some of the sightings as to if they are ET. They're making their presence known. I also think the prevalence of the modern era of so many events, the sightings, the continual mutilation events, these so-called abduction events, that we are looking at likely reverse engineered technology in the hands of humans that are not under government control or any type of high level control. I find that quite alarming. With regards to the technology itself, I work with folks who do know what is in our technological database and what is available to modern armies. The so-called ET technology, the ability to have silent engines and flying machines that makes no sound, flying machines that have the characteristics that are consistent with the reproduction of UFO sightings, are not in any nation's arsenal, but they do exist. So if they are back-engineered technologies existing, they are probably in the hands of this group of individuals. Formerly government, formerly perhaps intelligence, formerly under private sector control with some sort of oversight by military or by government. But this oversight is likely no longer the case as a result of this access denied category that is now operating. I call it a clandestine group. The technology is not in our military arsenals anywhere in the world, but it does exist, and to me, that's quite disconcerting. I do work with a number of groups. We do know about some of the things that the technologies are used for, and I want to assure you that these technologies are not that far beyond our current state of knowledge. Now, understanding it scientifically, understanding how it can be, is a long way from having a fully developed usable technology. But if, in our knowledge, we can understand how it has to be in order to create that technology, we're not that far away. So I want to assure you that we're not talking about technologies that are far-fetched, that we can't understand them. They're just beyond the technological horizon. I want to tell you that it doesn't appear we need to be using ultra dimensions and wormholes for this. It looks like our 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional space-time universe is about what it appears to be, and that we can operate within that space-time universe with these types of technologies. We have tended, like the ancients of old, to have invented myths about too many dimensions and time travel, wormholes, etc. It doesn't look like it's necessary to explain what we're seeing. That's the end of that. Chelsea, did you notice anything within there?
Oh yeah, Stephen Greer.
Yeah, he got involved with Stephen Greer a few years before this, so that's 97. Weirdly enough, the first time he talks about this publicly is in 96, and he likely got involved with Stephen Greer probably in the early 90s, let's say 93, 94.
Yeah, my concern there, it seems like he probably had an interest to be doing this, but it seems like Stephen Greer kind of has speaking to his benefit. Would I be wrong to say that?
See, I don't think that's wrong, and in fact, I would put it a step further. I think Stephen Greer is the whole reason he started talking about this. Stephen Greer saw him as a highly connected individual. Yeah. Within the UFO, not within the UFO community, within the government community.
Yeah.
Who could help him seem like he has a base for what he's talking about.
And he does say right in there that he doesn't have it, but like these people, like he believes that something's going on. So it does seem like he's using his connections.
And I'm very glad that you noticed that he specifically says, I have absolutely no firsthand evidence to give.
Here's what people think happened, but that didn't happen. And then he shouts out Stephen Greer.
Next up, Stephen Greer released a book in 98 called Disclosure, Military and Government Witnesses Reveal the Greatest Secrets in Modern History. And in it, they have a quote from Edgar Mitchell. So I'm going to...
What's it say? I haven't seen shit.
This is what he says in the book. My interest basically is what's the nature of the universe we live in? What is our relationship to the larger reality? If UFOs are a part of the larger reality and we are denying it, that to me is unconscionable. I don't live that way. I went to space to learn about the universe we live in, to get new insights, to go beyond boundaries of our known existence. And if these phenomena are really indicators of new information about the cosmos at all, and intelligence life in the cosmos, and our ability to travel in the cosmos, then we ought to get to the bottom of it. It's just my curiosity that drives me. There seems to have been, over the last 50 years, at least a great deal of secrecy surrounding the so-called UFO events. It's a very complex subject. We are not dealing with something that's very simple. We have sightings of all sorts. We've been reporting thousands and thousands of sightings for 50 years or so. Large numbers of these sightings are indeed misperceiving natural phenomena in some way, but a large number of them are not misperceiving. They are well-documented events that represent flying crafts that do not match anything we have in an earthbound arsenal, which is very short of saying we have validated in the public domain that they are ET crafts. We have to rely upon people who have been there and have firsthand data. The only people I know of that claim to have been in that position are former intelligence, military, and government people, and some contractor people whose official duties in these early days were to investigate this and know about it. These people were under, at the time, great restrictions and had high security clearance that prevented them from telling the general public about it. It would appear that period has long passed, but they are still under security restrictions, or at least believe they are. Yes, there have been ET visitations. There have been crashed crafts. There have been materials and bodies recovered. And there is some group of people somewhere that may or may not be associated with government at this point, but certainly were at one time that have this knowledge. They have been attempting to conceal this knowledge or not permit it to be widely disseminated. I cannot answer who are these people, but there is a lot of evidence that points to what I call a clandestine group of people who have some quasi-affiliation with the government and certain government facilities, but operate in a very stealth and secret way that is not generally under high-level government control, as far as we can tell. From all that I know, yes, there has been ET visitation and may continue to be. There have been crafts that have been recovered. There have been a certain amount of reverse engineering that has also allowed some of these crafts or some components to be duplicated, and that there are Earthlings who are utilizing some of this equipment in these certain ways. That's the end of that one.
How much do you think Stephen Greer
Coaxed him into that very specific way of talking? Yes, I agree with that fully. All of it.
do you even think that maybe Stephen Greer kind of penned what he should be writing and then was like, I'll give you $500?
Not only that, these high-ranking government officials who claim to have first-hand accounts of UFOs, do you not think Stephen Greer introduced them to him?
Absolutely. You know what? Stephen Greer was probably his first contact.
Oh, guaranteed. And it was just, he was rubbing elbows with the right guy.
And somebody actually indulged the fact that Stephen Greer was thinking that he had more connections than he did. He just weaseled his way in.
Funny enough, the next thing we're going to be reading comes from 2004. It's from Stephen Greer's website, and it's a writing by Dr. Stephen Greer, MD, published in August of 2004 issue of the World Affairs Journal. Of course, starts with a quote. I want you to guess whose quote this is to start the Stephen Greer article. Since the end of the second...
Probably says Edgar Mitchell, but it's probably Stephen Greer.
Just listen. Since the end of the Second World War, the U.S. military-industrial complex has secretly sponsored at great public cost to the R&D of new technologies for energy regeneration, air and outer space flight, futuristic weaponry, and other, mostly military ads, which have not been made available for the common good. Yet today's environmental and economic emergencies dictate that the accumulated know-how be used for the benefit of mankind and its peaceful applications. Who would have said that?
That's 100,000,000,000% Stephen Greer.
Yep, he quotes himself to start off this article.
I love that he quotes himself.
I don't know who I have to tell this to. If you're writing it down, you don't have to quote yourself.
No, I don't think I've ever quoted myself in my life.
No.
I don't see a point in needing to do that.
I should say, this article is called Secret and Covert Operations by the USA. The next part of this article is titled Expert Witnesses and Testimony. Sufficient evidence, documents, physical proof, and testimonies exist to definitively make the case for the reality of the issues as well as its illegal handling. Beginning in 1992, we met with senior government officials in the US, UK, and the United Nations and other agencies and discovered a remarkable degree of interest in resolving this problem and obtaining a general disclosure of the facts. The officials range from members of the US Senate Intelligence Committee to the first acting CIA director under President Clinton, including very senior admirals and generals at the Pentagon and in the British General Staff. There is widespread agreement that the subject has enormous implications for the future of humanity and that the secrecy has become inexcusable. What has been lacking is the will to take meaningful actions on the issue. While interest and moral support for disclosure are high, fear is even greater. Consider that some of these top secret whistleblowers, witnesses, have said about the secrecy and the fear it engenders. And Chelsea, do you want to know who he put down as a witness here?
George H.W. Bush.
No, Edgar fucking Mitchell. As a witness.
I was confused by the question.
I get that. But he puts him down as a freaking witness that proves that the government is hiding things.
I kind of had a feeling it was going to go that way.
So it says Edgar Mitchell, astronaut. And then he has this little, you know how the witnesses always have the vaguest statements that he's going to put in here. So from Edgar Mitchell, whatever activity is going on, to the extent that it is a clandestine group, a quasi-government group, a quasi-private group, it is without any type, as far as I can tell, of high-level government oversight, and it is of great concern. Mitchell later made a statement to the media, reported in the St. Petersburg Times, February 28, 2004, the aliens have landed. A few insiders know the truth and are studying the bodies. A cabal of insiders stopped briefing presidents about extraterrestrials after President Kennedy. End of quote there. End of that.
What I'm gathering from this is that he's gone from like reputable to not. And he's just a conspiracy theorist now.
It's going to change a little bit as we go, but Stephen Greer introduced him to the community, showed him some insiders who had some witness information, and then turned him into a freaking witness.
That's Stephen Greer, though. You give him a little bit and he just stretches it out so far.
You give him a good title and he stretches it as far as the eye can see.
That's Stephen Greer. We learned that about him.
Yeah, but I found it so fascinating that it's clearly, like, you can see this. Edgar Mitchell's being strung along by Stephen Greer. Like, there's no question about it.
You probably don't have anything on Edgar Mitchell commenting on this, do you?
Hey, guess what my next article is?
Yes!
Edgar Mitchell most unhappy with Greer using his name as a disclosure witness.
I'm so happy about this.
This is the start of it. Edgar Mitchell stating, the Washington Times on UFO disclosure mentions my name as a witness for the disclosure project, which I am not and have not been. I am not surprised at all. If you look to see who is running that CSETI horse and pony disinfo show and tell, you will recognize familiar names. Consider the source. As a Navy man and NASA astronaut who really was out there, you know what I mean. I cooperated with Stephen Greer some years ago, but he began to overreach his data continuously, necessitating a withdrawal by myself and I believe several others. I have requested to be removed from any website announcements, etc., but see that this has not taken place. Jack. Typical of politically based influence operations. The real motive of the press club event was the issue of militarization of space, not UFOs, on which reasonable, well-meaning people can differ, of course. Since many millions of voters believe UFOs are real, getting control of the UFO movement clearly is a top priority for all players. Ed. Although I firmly believe it is time for openness and disclosure by government, I object to being misused in this fashion and I acquire guilt by association with certain claims that simply are not true. Jack. I feel exactly as you do. I think you, Don Ecker, and I see it eye to eye on this one. Ed. I, nor any crew I was on, received any briefings before or after flights on UFO events. Saw anything in space suggesting UFOs or structures on the moon. We did it just like we said in official reports. My only claim to knowledge of these events is from the individuals mostly of yesteryear who were in government, intelligence, or military. Were there, saw what they saw, and now believe it should be made public. But I claim no first-hand knowledge nor have any. Pass it on to the rest of the net, if you will. That's the end of that one.
I think we ought to start closing our episodes with that exact sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Pass it on to the rest of the net, if you will.
If you will.
Thank you and good night. Yes, you will. And you will. I love that for him.
Yeah.
And that just track with the type of person that Stephen Greer is. Taking all the liberties and such.
Yeah, and this was written in 2001. I had to put it after I quoted the Stephen Greer website in 2004. But he clearly found out after like a 7-8 year friendship that Stephen Greer is exactly who we all know him to be, and had to distance himself from that.
That took him a really long time, actually. I also question his credibility. No, he did call him out after all that time, so he
I know, he got better than some, but the fact that he got to that point after 8 years and finally realized it, but also still seems to lean on the information he got from Stephen Greer for why aliens exist.
It sounds like that's probably where it kind of not started, like he had an interest.
No, but pushed him down that path.
Yeah, and then that's where all his ideas were formed. Just my theorizing about it.
I find it really unfortunate that he just blamed Stephen Greer, and he probably still believes the sources he got from Stephen Greer were legitimate, and Stephen Greer told him exactly how they worked out to push him forward within this.
Yeah.
So the next one, this is a fairly prominent thing. When you look at Edgar Mitchell, this is one of the art interviews that he does that ends up being big. July 23rd, 2008, he went on Kerrang Radio with Nick Margerison, and he states, "I happen to have been privileged enough to be on the fact that we've been visited on this planet and the UFO phenomenon is real." Now, I need to make this statement very clear at this point, Chelsea. If we didn't know anything about Edgar Mitchell, we might think that this has some sort of association with him being an astronaut, would we not?
Yes.
But guess what? It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with those sources that Stephen Greer introduced him to. So he goes on to say, yes, there have been ET visitation. There have been crashed crafts. There have been materials and bodies recovered. There have been a certain amount of reverse engineering that has allowed some of the crafts or some components to be duplicated. And there is some group of people that may or may not be allowed with government at this point that have this knowledge. They have been attempting to conceal this information. People in high-level government have very little, if any, valid information. In response to this, NASA actually made a statement through Brian Dunning. They stated NASA is not involved in any sort of cover-up about alien life on this planet or anywhere in the universe. Dr. Mitchell is a great American, but we do not share his opinion on this issue. But you always have to remember, when you're reading these articles, if you don't know his background and how he was introduced to this 20 years after his astronaut career, this might come across as you saying things about your astronaut career. Does it not come across that way?
It very well does, and perhaps he also learned to grift like Stephen Greer.
And he actually did state.
Unfortunately.
So he made those statements on July 23rd. On July 25th, he was on Fox News, and he very specifically clarifies that his comments did not involve NASA, but quoted unnamed sources since deceased at Roswell who confided to him that the Roswell incident did involve an alien craft.
Why would he continue this after Stephen Greer? Obviously, my theory wasn't right that Stephen Greer was forcing him to do this. He was going around willingly. I don't know. What's his deal?
I'm just speculating at this point, but he thinks Stephen Greer is the bad actor, but the information he received through other sources within the Stephen Greer universe is legit, so he can move forward with it.
It does seem that way. I think your interpretation is right, and it really confuses me as to what he's doing moving forward with information that came secondhand.
And he won't even say who told him. That's the really annoying thing. This is exactly like Stephen Greer in his interviews.
What Stephen Greer does.
Yes. Oh, I have 700 people that I've talked to, and they're all right. Also, I might add, Stephen Greer doesn't laugh in his interviews. What's wrong with that man?
Exactly. What a fucking creep.
Yeah. We have to take a little bit of a break from the UFO thing because there's a whole lawsuit that happens in the middle here.
We know more about it?
Well, we know everything about it. It's kind of just a hilarious aside I have to do. On June 29, 2011, the federal government of the US filed a lawsuit against Edgar Mitchell in the United States District Court in Miami, Florida, after discovering that he placed a camera used in Apollo 14 for auction at the auction house Bonhams. The litigation requested the camera be returned to NASA. Mitchell's position was that NASA had given him the camera as a gift upon the completion of Apollo 14, but the auction site Bonhams withdrew the camera for auction. In October of 2011, attorneys representing the government and Mitchell reached a settlement agreement, and Mitchell agreed to return the camera to NASA, which in turn would donate it for display at the National Air and Space Museum. On September 20th, 2012, Congress enacted H.R. 4158, confirming full ownership of rights of artifacts to astronauts on Apollo space missions.
Oh, he's the one that fucked that up, eh?
I just found that hilarious that they gave him a camera and he tried to auction it off, and they actually had to pass something in Congress saying, no, that's our camera.
Yeah, he's the one that fucked it up for everyone. Way to go, Edgar Mitchell.
On September 18th, 19th of 2014, NASA and the Library of Congress hosted a symposium concerning preparations for the discovery of extraterrestrial life titled Preparing for Discovery, a rational approach to the implications of finding microbial, complex, and intelligent life beyond Earth. The symposium failed to address the UFO phenomenon in any way, except in one statement regarding a question from a member of the audience. In response to this situation, Edgar Mitchell joined with 3 other writers to forward an open letter to NASA and the Library of Congress pointing out the remarkable omissions of UFO data. The title of the open letter was Neglected and Unacknowledged Evidence, a Response to Preparing for Discovery. NASA Library of Congress Astrobiology Symposiums. Others who signed the 12-page letter, Paul Hellyer, a former Deputy Minister of Canada, and Canadian UFO journalist Victor Vigiani. The open letter stated, the current research within the systemic knowledge base to which we refer unequivocally confirms the existence of a wide range of hard data that points directly to the substantive reality of the phenomenon commonly referred to as unidentified flying objects. Secondly, there exists unimpeachable evidence originating from high-level government and military sources, witness testimony, and government documents that not only validate the UFO reality, but also corroborate government and military efforts to create an embargo around this knowledge and consequently sequester it from the public.
He doesn't know that.
This category of evidence, were it to have been considered for inclusion on the symposium days, could clarify and provide lucid authentication as to the validity of the UFO phenomenon, and moreover the palpable possibility that we are in fact being engaged by off-world civilizations to eliminate rigorous examinations of either of these possibilities at all levels of inquiry is by definition unscientific. That's the end of that one.
Okay, well, this boring guy is becoming an asshole.
Yeah, I really feel like he got it almost right with his rebuke of Stephen Greer, but he missed a big part of it.
Yeah, this is crazy. He's now Stephen Greering it. He's using his platform as an astronaut to make it seem like he knows something and he knows nothing.
And Chelsea, this goes so weird too. In 2015, Edgar Mitchell did an interview with the Daily Mirror, and he stated that extraterrestrials had been attempting to keep us from going to war with Russia and help create peace on Earth. He also said, quote, White Sands was a testing ground for atomic weapons, and that's what the extraterrestrials were interested in. They wanted to know more about military capabilities, end quote. Mm-hmm. Like, he just keeps going into weird subgroups that, like, this is not where your expertise should be in any way, and he just keeps going.
Where he's getting his information from?
Nope. Never does.
Never does.
Never does.
Just like Stephen Greer. He learned everything from Stephen Greer and threw him under the bus. It was like, fuck you, Stephen Greer. Don't use my name for this. And then he's like, what are those guys' names again? Oh, you won't give it to me? Okay, I'll just say protecting them. Got it.
But Chelsea, you know what? A good guy in the UFO community who we haven't done an asshole episode on, so we don't think he's an asshole, but he might be an asshole. Nick Pope made statements about Edgar Mitchell, which I want to make now.
Yes, please.
Nick Pope stated, I didn't put the date down, but that's okay. Edgar Mitchell is an honorable and truthful man who I've had the privilege of meeting. But, so as far as I'm aware, most of his information on this issue comes not from things he's experienced himself, but from things he's been told by others. Clearly, because of who he is, he's had access to government, military, and intelligence community personnel at high levels, but because, quite understandably, he won't name his sources, we can't be certain that these people were being straight with him, or indeed that they were privy to any classified information about UFOs.
Or even that they are speaking to him directly.
The idea that peace-loving extraterrestrials are here to warn communities about our destructive ways is popular with those who take a New Age view on the UFO persona. It's a nice thought, but if I'm being skeptical, I'd point out that it's almost exactly the plot of the classic 1951 science fiction movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. There have certainly been some intriguing UFO sightings around nuclear facilities and around military bases more generally, but an alternative explanation is that some of these sightings are attributable to espionage activity involving secret spy planes or drones. Given that the universe is around 14 billion years old, if we were being visited, it's unlikely we're dealing with a civilization just a few hundred years ahead of us, so stories of aliens managing to disrupt a few of our weapons tests are far-fetched. Chances are they'd be millions millions of years ahead of us and could do anything they wanted to. That's his quote when it comes to the whole Edgar Mitchell thing.
You know who Edgar Mitchell would be a good target for?
Stephen Greer.
Stephen Greer, Richard Doty, someone planting disinformation.
Richard Doty.
Disinformation. I don't think Richard Doty's stupid enough to be like, I'm gonna go feed him disinformation, because he's doing it to himself.
Interestingly enough, I don't know what this has to do with anything, but I don't think Richard Doty has ever disinfoed somebody who worked for the government previously.
That's true.
That's a weird comment. I don't know if it's just like maybe he never actually got to meet him.
Maybe, but at the same time, he seems to be disinfoing himself. Doesn't seem like he's doing any groundbreaking research. It doesn't seem like he's doing anything. He's just...
No, it really just seems like he takes info and then regurgitates it. I agree.
It's so weird. So if I were Richard Doty, I'd be like, he's doing it to himself. He's good.
But unfortunately, Chelsea, his regurgitating days are past. Edgar Mitchell died in hospice in West Palm Beach on February 14th, 2016, at the age of 85. It was the eve of the 45th anniversary of his lunar landing.
Wow.
He's a guy who's passed, but nevertheless, I found it very important to still talk about him. Just because he's passed doesn't mean his story doesn't carry on. Chelsea, he still has stories coming out about him. This article title, Wife of Apollo Astronaut Reveals Husband's Strange Encounters with UFOs He Told Her Before He Died.
Dear Lord.
I believe this is Cunilad, published on March 15th of 2025 by Britt Jones. Anita Mitchell was married to the late NASA pilot Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth man to walk on the moon in 1971. According to the wife of an Apollo astronaut, her husband used to tell her secrets about what he really saw in space. Keeping in mind, Anita Mitchell was the second of 3 wives who wasn't his wife during the moon landing. She is married to him from 73 to I think 80, somewhere in there, before he met the Playboy Bunny.
Before the moon landing or after?
After the moon landing. He was on the moon in 71. He married her in 73. He told the Daily Mail that he had encounters with strange things and that it wasn't unusual to see something out of the ordinary. She said, quote, he always felt that there were UFOs out there because so many of the pilots and astronauts had seen something, end quote. Which, yeah, we knew. That doesn't say he saw anything with that quote.
No, not at all.
She claims that some of his crewmates, including Apollo astronaut James McDivitt, reported seeing mysterious objects such as the strange craft. Mitchell shared, and Mitchell, by that I mean Anita, not Edgar. Quote, I remember Gordy telling us at a dinner party in our house that he had seen something. He said, listen, we have nothing that goes that fast and goes that high, end quote. Cooper took part in the Mercury and Gemini projects and was part of the early missions. She has now got so many stories from ex-NASA astronauts that she decided to tell it all in a new book titled You Don't Look Like an Astronaut's Wife. She was married to the husband from 73 to 84 and the astronaut died in 2016. However, he has always...
She's trying to make money.
It sure does, doesn't it? Although, weird time, like 9 years after he died. Does she just feel like she's nearing the end and needs to get that money out of it?
Definitely. And he can't repeat it, right?
I think that's as far as I need to go. Chelsea, I'm going to end this off with the Rational Wiki story on Edgar Mitchell, okay?
Okay.
Edgar Mitchell was an Apollo astronaut, founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and UFO conspiracy nut. He is the only astronaut to have publicly divulged LSD experimentation, which we didn't talk about. That's through the noetic science stuff. Although his post-lunar beard was not nearly as fetching as transcendental meditation practitioner Rusty Schweigart's Skylab-era Shagan chops. Mitchell never claimed or even hinted that he saw anything alien on the moon on the way to the moon or on the way back from the moon. He never ever said he'd seen an alien on Earth, despite having been raised not far from Roswell. However, he said many times that he'd been briefed by senior military officials and that alien visitation is an established fact. Other UFO believers love him because they think that his claims are insider info. That's the end of his article. And that's the end of my episode. So Chelsea, what do you think of Edgar Mitchell?
I'm certainly happy that it wasn't another boring guy episode. And I'm sure everyone else will be happy that they got another asshole episode. Probably not that we were laughing.
I don't know if I can call him an asshole. Is he an asshole by omission?
In my official asshole judgment, I am filing him under asshole. The type of asshole, though, is up for debate. I would call him a naive asshole. That's what I'm filing it under.
You know, that's not a bad way to put it. But how
Very.
naive? Because you got to give him a lot of credit for at least acknowledging the fact that Stephen Greer is an asshole. And he should not be listened to because he used him completely incorrect. But then just completely strayed away
That's
from
why he's
anything else
naive.
within that regard.
I think for him to continue on in exactly the fashion,
And you know what?
it
Yeah.
seems as exactly the fashion to which he called Stephen Greer out.
Yeah.
Naive feels right.
And now that I think about it, yeah, naive in that the only time you ever called somebody out is when it's him being completely
Someone else.
lied about.
Me.
Like, that's it.
I'm
Yeah.
Javeled hitting the desk. I ruled.
And I do have to agree, I would call him an asshole by omission. The fact that he allows the term astronaut to be attached to everything that he's doing bothers me a lot.
Well, doesn't the doctor for Dr. Stephen Greer bother you?
Yes, that one does
Same
too.
thing. Both assholes.
Especially love in his documentaries when they're like, "Oh, you're a doctor, so you're going to be doing the autopsy."
And
of
it's
course,
the same reason that Stephen Greer does it. It's the clout.
It's the clout that it attaches
Absolutely.
to it. He does, if it gets brought up at all, he will specifically state, this has nothing to do with my astronaut life, but he doesn't state it on his own, which I think is an important distinction. Whereas Stephen Greer, he'll just avoid it entirely.
I'm filing it under the same thing. I think they're up to the same kind of stuff. Edgar Mitchell seems a little bit more naive about it.
I would put him above Stephen Greer. Stephen Greer is a bigger asshole.
It was like
than Edgar
above
Mitchell.
how.
There is some goodness towards Edgar Mitchell, but
Stephen Greer didn't have a boring part. It was all asshole.
all asshole all the time. But I think this did uncover some names that we're going to have to look into in the future. I do want to do a Nick Pope episode at some point.
Right now.
I am just a little worried about him becoming an asshole.
There's people I'm concerned about and are seeming more and more like an asshole.
Most of them were broadcasters on Coast to Coast in my mind at this point. But in any event, I have been Taylor, here with Chelsea. We are Journey to the Fringe. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Journey to the Fringe. If you have liked what you have listened to, please like, share, subscribe, or follow, depending on what venue you are listening to us through. Also, please, if possible, leave a 5-star review, as that really helps us in the algorithms. Should you wish to interact with us, please check us out on your social media of choice. I bet you we are there. And if you really want to communicate with us and give us ideas for new episodes or tell us that we're wrong and terrible, either way, please send us an email at journeytothefringe@gmail.com. For now, I'll see you in the next episode.